I don't have a bit to do with the invisible guy in the corner. One, two, three, four, mana, ti, ti, ta, ta, ta. Da, 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 ti, ta, ta, ta. Bitty bop bop beat da da. It's Wednesday. I'm in. Hi everybody. My name's Jimmy. I went to the comic book store today. Picks of the week. Pretty decent sized week at the old shop this week. I don't want to brag. um, I was thinking today though. I really need to start cutting back on some stuff. And the books I'm going to show you here are all new books, and unless they're, I don't want to disparage them before I even read them, but unless they're really kicking my ass, I got to cut back on some stuff. Having said that, I don't have anything. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know if I've mentioned this already, but I have been having, this is honestly one of the worst pandemics I've ever lived through. Since when the quarantine started, I was really I was really worried I wouldn't have enough things to do to fill the hours, so I started piling things on top of me. That was 6 months ago, and now it's like deadlines are all starting to come up that I agreed to 6 months ago and all this stuff. So I'm just running ragged, and now I'm not unemployed anymore, or partially unemployed. I was never completely unemployed. So, you know, now I'm back to working my ass off for less money than I was making. And it doesn't matter because we're all going to be dead before Christmas time. So, having said that, all right, see, first up this week, we have An Unkindness of Ravens, #1. This is from Boom Studios. Yep. Boom is starting. I was talking to Warren down at the shop today, and he noticed, and I hadn't really noticed this yet, but he said that if you had told him even like a year ago that there would be any more new publishers kind of taking a chunk of the market, he would have said, no, it's impossible. There's too many. But Boom is really, Boom's been around a while now, but they're really continuing to climb steadily. But then you have Aftershock, who's also doing one of these books, right? Yeah. And AWA and TKO and other publishers that aren't just three letters. I pointed this out because I'm very intelligent, that because IDW and Dark Horse seem to be putting out way less product. Dark Horse is really trying to cling on to the things that are kind of proven. Like there's a new Umbrella Academy series, and so that's got some heat on it because of the show. Although they release it as Tales from it's not filed under Umbrella Academy, so it's just going to make people who are unfamiliar with how comic books work, it's going to make it more difficult for them to find. Jeez Louise. I have 3 minutes and I'm in complete minutia. So, I don't know what this book is, but speaking of Umbrella Academy, it looks like a similar kind of, there's a lot of this nowadays. Umbrella Academy was just kind of the first, but the Fabulous Killjoys, who I think was the same Wingnut, whatever crappy band that guy's in. Same deal, right? I mean, Killjoys was definitely that guy. But then you also have, like, who else? I don't want to talk about that guy because he's a sex offender. There's other books lately, though. It seems like over the last 10 years or so, there's been more of a call. Morning Glories is another one. More of a call for youth-centric books. Deadly Class. Black Science a little bit. Deadly Class for sure. Youth-centric books that are pretty much just the X-Men. Teenagers in a high school environment enacting, their own mutant powers or the powers of assassination, etc., or, whatever other goofy thing. The Boys had a lot of that going on, especially in the G-Men storyline, and good God am I going on. I think the last couple of things I've done have been only like 7 minutes, so now all of that is this is my hour special. I'm actually filming this at the Apollo Theater in New York, New York. Now, this was none of these books that I'm showing you this week were books that I had planned on. I saw this on the list for this week, and I made a note of it because Dan Panosian is writing it. Dan Panosian also did the cover art, and he's one of the finest comic book artists working today, especially given that in the 90s, he really was largely, he took over for Todd McFarlane on Spawn. As I'm remembering this completely wrong, he was the first guy other than McFarlane to draw Spawn, and I always assumed that was largely because his stuff looked a lot like Todd McFarlane's. And McFarlane is a very canny businessman, and he realized Spawn had a certain look to it that needed to be kept up, but he wanted to spend more time trying to buy baseballs. So, home run balls. I got some home run balls for you. But in the, I want to say like the early part of like the early teens, Panosian, or that was when I started to notice Panosian really come into his own, and his art is very, it doesn't look anything like McFarlane anymore. He's really got more of a, nope, I can't pull who he reminds me of now. I guess more in like, he's kind of in that more Chris Sprousey. There's Chris Sprouse and there's another guy that drew The Filth that has a very similar look. They've both worked with Grant Morrison, but that's what this reminds me of. And it's also in that Morning Glories vein. Morning Glories was another school book by Nick Spencer, who's now mostly just writing every Spider-Man book being published today. But he was kind of an indie darling. I read the first trade, and I honestly could not tell you a single thing about it, except that all the characters are wearing school uniforms, so it's a lot of plaid. So I made a note of the An Unkindness of Ravens. I'm really going on too long. But I don't know that I've ever read anything Panosian has written before, and not to make any sorts of premature judgments, but a lot of the I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible. A lot of the time when artists turn their skills to writing, there's a little much of it. These guys have been practicing really hard at being able to draw really well, so their writing skills might not be quite as up to par. That's the nicest way I can say that most artists are not great writers. But we'll see. And I don't recognize the other names, Mariana Ignazzi and Fabiana Mascolo, and not to engage in any sort of racial profiling, but those sound like Italian names to me. And honestly, lately, Italian artists have been killing it. I'm thinking specifically of Andrea Sorrentino, but there's Giuseppe Camuncoli. See, now then I'll start naming them. There'll just be a million of them. So that's good news. All right, good. What else did I get this week? I also got Sun Eater #1 from the Heavy Metal publisher. Heavy Metal has been actually putting out some pretty decent comics. I run hot and cold on Heavy Metal, the magazine. I think I have a few issues. Like, I have a stack to read. And I know, like, I've bought a few more issues of Heavy Metal in the last couple of years than I have in a while. I think a handful of old ones at a comic book show. But then occasionally they'll put out, like, they put out that Soft Wood magazine, which I think I talked about on here, where it was like a humor mag. It was like them trying to do Not Brand X, sort of. And I liked it. It was very inside baseball for comic book nerds, but I like that sort of thing. They also put out a few books by Ennis, I want to say at least one, and then a couple by Donny Cates, which I really liked, like a Tomahawk, which is just a great name. I think like there's a couple of the Donny Cates ones, Interceptor. I think I'm missing a couple issues still, but and this was when he was kind of transitioning from indie darling to Marvel, so it felt really kind of almost not rushed necessarily, but like they were like, we got to put these out now. Well, Cates has some heat. This has nothing to do with anything. I'm sorry. So I don't, off the top of my head, like Dylan Sprouse and Joe Harris, those names sound very familiar. And I'm pretty sure if Joe Harris is who I'm thinking of, he's a writer more. Yeah, written by Dylan Sprouse. Oh, I see. Created by Dylan Sprouse, written by Dylan Sprouse with Joe Harris, illustrated by Diego Yapur. So Joe Harris is an old hand. Dylan Sprouse might be related to Chris Sprouse, but he might be like a new writer, or she, what do I know? And so they're like, well, we'll let Harris kind of, that's usually what that means. And then the artist, Diego Yapur, I do not know. But, I mean, the cover's pretty, this looks like a Glenn Fabry cover, though. No, it's not. Well, that's good. If this guy draws like Glenn Fabry, then I'm in good hands. And then finally this week I got Miles to Go, which was, I saw and I didn't really even make a note of it. But Warren down at the shop, he did it with An Unkindness of Ravens also. He just put it in my bag because he thought, there'd be a pretty good chance that I would like it. And actually, I got Sun Eater for free, but he charged me a wrong discount, so he gave me one of these books for free. I got a lot of pull down at Galaxy Comics. I mean, Jesus Christ. It's one of my, I think I spend more, no, I spent more on groceries today. Today was one of the few weeks I spent more on groceries than on comic books. Guess which is more important to me? So this is written by B. Clay Moore, who's a very good writer, but is not a writer I've ever really sought out. He had a series back in the late aughts called Hawaiian Dick. There might have even been like early aught, like through that decade. And it was a private eye story set on the island of Hawaii. You perverts. And it was good. I have many interests that take up a lot of my time, but I also have kind of a lot of minor interests, like things that I like, but I'm not very well versed in. And it was a private eye story that took place in the 50s in Hawaii. And that particular brand of 1950s tiki aesthetic really kind of rings my bell a little bit. What a dork. So I bought that comic because of that. And it wasn't bad, but it didn't really blow me away like I was hoping it would. This is by, that's where that went. Hey, welcome to my video series, Old Man Finds His Super Glue that he thought he had misplaced. Looking all over for that the other day. One of these days I gotta get organized, said Travis Bickle. Oh, right. This is put out by the nice people at Aftershock Comics, which was the other, besides Boom, the other, smaller publisher that's really kind of starting to take a bite. I mean, they've been around good 6-7 years at this point, at least, but they're still, like, putting out quality stuff. I don't recognize the artist's name on here, but this is a very good cover. I will admit that, and I never thought I'd say anything like this, I'm starting to OD a little bit on noir and crime stuff. I don't know if I can impress upon you, nor would I care to, nor should you care to, but I don't think I could impress upon you how strange that is, because for many, 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 many years, crime was like my biggest thing. I was trying to be a crime fiction novelist all through my 20s, well into my 30s before I started doing stand-up. So I've always been a big reader of it as well since high school. And not so much anymore, I guess. I don't really read much true crime. I mean, this is really weird. Well, it's not that weird because true crime is now popular, which means I'm the kind of dickhead that is going to not like it. I don't think that's what's happening, but I wouldn't trust myself. What am I on about? All right, that's Picks of the Week. And now Picks of last week. All right, let me try and... I just honestly... I am... Oh, boy. All right. Well, we'll start with Stillwater by Chip Zdarsky. I remember liking this. That's all I remember. I don't even remember what the hell happens in this book. Boy, oh, boy. I didn't even read this that long ago. It might have been Saturday or Sunday, which to me is very long ago now. Okay, right. And this and that. And then this. I do like this book. So this is about this town of Stillwater. It's one of these. So our hero, who's drunken, obnoxious lout, obviously one of these noir-y bad boys with a chip on his shoulder, a pretty face, and all that kind of thing. He gets word that his father has died or some relative has died, so he has to go back to the small town that he grew up in, and things go awry. And I don't want to spoil it, but this town holds a very weird secret. It's not where he grew up, but it's not far from something like that. It's obviously meant to be symbolic of just small town America and how it will go to great lengths to keep things as they are, the way they ought to be, like that sort of thing. So it's not anything. Stillwater is not breaking any really new ground. But the art by Ramon K. Perez, whose name I think I recognize from another Marvel book too. Really good art, and the story is a little. It's I don't want to say cliched. It's just this shy of cliched. I don't want to damn with faint praise, but it's similar to, like, and this doesn't surprise me, but it's similar to Brian K. Vaughan's scripts often. start to edge too close to cutesy. Like the dialogue, it's very Sex and the City and Friends and like that. And I don't care for that. But it always kind of pulls it back in. With Saga, it didn't, and that's why I stopped reading Saga. But anyway. So yeah, I would recommend this. If you trade weight it though, I don't think that would be like a thing. I mean, you need me to tell you that. I don't even know why the hell I buy single issues. I mean, they're all written to be trades at this point. This one also I read last week was Heavy #1 from Vault Comics. This is a similar thing with Stillwater. And I don't want to give the impression that these were bad comics. We're not. They're comics designed to scratch a very particular itch. And I don't always have that itch, and as I'm finding out, I don't have that itch quite as much as I used to, but I still recognize that these are good. Okay. It's been a rough, like I say, this week has been a rough few weeks. So Heavy, as it was pitched to me by Warren down at the shop, it was The Punisher, but kind of more of a heaven and hell thing. So our main character here is kind of like an angelic enforcer, across all the space-time continuum. So he's having to go and kill Hitlers in several realities and stuff like that to try to keep everything even. It's it's very typical vague mythology or like vague moral code, like that bad, really, really bad, which I never even saw it, but that Wanted movie that was based on the comic by Mark Millar. Just this vague notion of like, oh, we have to keep the balance and shadowy figures will be upset otherwise, but this guy has to stay. When you're this guy, when this kind of enforcer assassin type, after a while they're supposed to bump you up so you get to go to heaven. This is kind of like a purgatory you're in, or whatever vague notion they call heaven in this book. And but they've not yet, even though those guys killed millions or thousands or however many souls, they still haven't promoted them. And then at the end, I don't want to spoil it, but at the end of the issue actually complicates the story, and rather than resolving the plot lines in the first issue. It's a weird choice, but I respect it. And who let this guy on set today? And finally, this was really fun. This is Headlopper number 13, and this is volume 4, number 1. So obviously you're not going to want to start here. Although frankly you could, and you wouldn't really be that out of the loop. You just want to read volumes 1 through 3 because they're super good. Headlopper, as I mentioned last week, is written and drawn by Andrew MacLean, colored by Jordi Belair, who's, probably the premier colorist in the industry right now, which doesn't sound like much to anybody outside of the industry. Hell, I'm not even really in the industry. It doesn't sound like much to me, but no, it is. It's a lot more to it than I used to always think. This is so much fun, and like I was saying last week, it's sword and sandal, kind of fantasy, sorcery stuff. Sword and sandal, or what's the other phrasing? Sword and sorcery, whatever. Because it's not being presented like a Dungeons and Dragons manual, and that very fantasy's got a very. For my day job, I read a lot of fantasy manuscripts come across my desk, and boy oh boy, do they have the same 5 notes they all hit. And it's really boring. If you're into it, I get it. I don't want to yuck anyone's yum, but this is much more it's more cartoony. It's a little more indie feeling-y. It almost feels like Jim Woodring, which is a weird comparison to make, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. I can't recommend it enough. He also did a book, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, called Apocalyptic Girl, which I didn't like that much, but I still would recommend. It's still it's weird to say, I know, because I didn't like it that much, but I wouldn't be uncomfortable recommending it. Like if somebody was like, I was like, I didn't like it, but you should read it because it's still pretty good. That was picked up last week. Good, we're back up to 20 minutes now. Ugh. All right, everybody. I'm going to try and get all caught up because X of Swords started this week and I'm all stoked for that. I still haven't read the Aftermath to Empire. I haven't finished, the lead-ins to X of Swords. I got a lot on my plate. All right, let's just somebody give me a new plate. All right, I'll see you next time. I'm trying to make this 20 minutes even because why not, right? So anyway, how have you been? 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Oh, what comes after 3?